All right. Good morning, good afternoon. How's everyone doing today? Um, Nice to see a lot of familiar faces. Hey, nice to see a lot of familiar faces on the Zoom here. Um, my name is Eric Hansen, and this is social media trends for 2024. A little bit more about me. I am an independent social media consultant. I've been doing that for 15 years. I work mostly with mid-sized and large companies, but not all the time. Um, I also am an adjunct professor at the University of St. Thomas. We started class this week, so that's kind of exciting. Um, these are the kinds of companies I usually work with, but like I said, I've worked with a bunch of government units and cities actually in the past year, which has been kind of interesting. But mostly mid-sized and large companies like the ones you see here, mostly in the Twin Cities. And my work revolves around four different buckets: audits and strategy, which you'll hear me refer to the audits a lot today, content strategy and production, obviously, social media training and coaching, which kind of popped up during the pandemic, but has been an interesting little niche for me to fill. And then something I just recently rolled out, this kind of concept of fractional social media leadership, which has been getting some interesting reception from people, maybe between social media leaders or your social media person is on maternity or paternity leave. I can kind of help fill the gap while you're looking for a new person or while the person is out. So some of the areas where I work. If you're interested in sign up for my newsletter, a number of you are already, so thank you. You can scan this and sign up for that now. The aim of the newsletter is to kind of keep people ahead of the curve, just kind of like what you're seeing today. So if you find today's presentation interesting, I'd encourage you to sign up for that. I don't really do much selling there. It's more um, informational in nature. So encourage you to sign up for that. But we are here to talk about trends, so let's do that. Little little level setting though before we dive in. Trends is kind of a loaded term, as we all know, and I will say that I'm not a futurist, but this woman is Amy Webb. She's a great futurist, full-time job. We hired her twice on the MEMA board years ago to speak at MEMA Summit, and she was fantastic. So I would highly encourage you to find her on the web and sign up for her trend report because it's awesome and it's super in depth, super well organized, and she is very smart. So I'm not a futurist. Amy is. Follow her. I also try not to make a lot of predictions in the trends you're going to see here. I can't help it in some spots, but generally I don't. However, I do like Adam Kamek's predictions every year. He's a guy who works for leadership role at United Health Group, and what I like about his predictions is he goes back at the end of the year and he evaluates them. He kind of checks against how he did. We don't see that a lot in society right now. So I really appreciate that Adam does that. So if you're interested in that, you can follow Adam on LinkedIn. And I don't really know what's going to happen next. None of us do for the most part. But Greg Swan talks about this all the time. And if you're really interested in that kind of thing, I would encourage you to follow him. So not a futurist, try not to make predictions, and I don't know what's going to happen next. However, I do have a lot of experience in social media marketing, 15 plus years now. I have completed more than 30 different social media audits over the last 5 years, which probably puts me in a unique territory there. And I do read a ton about social media marketing every week because I have to for class, I have to for the podcast, I have to for many different reasons. And I think all those things together give me a little bit of a unique perspective on this kind of stuff. So today, what you are going to see in this presentation is a more pragmatic look at trends versus future forward. So again, Greg, look for him for the future for really futuristic stuff. This is going to be a little more pragmatic today. You're going to see a lot of stats, surveys, and case studies featured. I'd like to back up my, I guess, claims with a little bit more oomph behind it with those things. And then behind each trend, you'll find a thought starter or a piece of advice. I think my job is to get you thinking differently, maybe about your social media marketing, or give you just a couple ideas on how you can do things differently. And if I've done that, then I guess I've done my job. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go through 10 of these really quickly. Hopefully, we can get through this in an hour, and I probably won't have a lot of time for questions. But if you have questions at the end, just email me. You can find me on the web pretty easily. DM me on LinkedIn, whatever, or we can have coffee. Ask me to coffee, and we can do that. We can discuss it as well. So jumping right in, number one, I think there's going to be a big channel hyper focus this year, really. And the reason behind this is we know organic engagement rates are down on Facebook. Obviously, we've known that for a long time. That's not breaking news at all. But engagement rates across the board, no matter the industry, no matter the platform, they're low. We know they're low, right? This is from a study that Hootsuite did where they did it by industry sector, and you can see here, none of these engagement rates are blowing anyone away. Like these are all very low, right? So in spots they're higher, but in spots they're very low. So I know I'm not breaking ground there, but when you layer over this information, this is a study conducted by Forrester Consulting that talks about the complexity in our world, you start to see the problem. So number of marketing products or products or service providers we work with has almost doubled in just 3 years. The number of channels we manage has doubled in 3 years. The number of technology solutions we work with has tripled in 3 years. You're starting to get a sense of what's going on, right? We're not talking about 10 years here. We're talking about 3 years. So our jobs are becoming really, really complex, and those engagement rates are really low. So it's really not surprising you see on Hootsuite's recent trends report, the number one social media ROI concern for brands is the time and money it takes to maintain a multi-platform presence. Like we got all these channels, how are we going to keep these going? That's the number one challenge. And when they poll people in that same presentation, you can see here what is the number one thing that makes having a multi-platform presence challenging. Yeah, constant platform updates. Yes. We're stretched too thin with too many tasks and responsibilities. Yes. We have to tailor content to all these platforms. Yes. All of it. Yes. Right? This is a huge challenge. There's no question about it. And we see brands that are already starting to do this, right? So we see brands, retail-y brands kind of gravitating towards, not all retail brands, but brands gravitating towards TikTok. We know LinkedIn is a huge B2B channel, right? That's a primary channel for B2B. And we know really Instagram has become the number one channel for a lot of brands. So those are kind of the new big three in a way. And then meanwhile, you see people moving gently away from Facebook, right? You see a lot more people moving away from Twitter and X. Pinterest, you can see that at the bottom. So we're starting to see this already. Best Buy paused its Twitter activity, at least on its brand account, a year and a half ago. Whole Foods, same thing. Target, same thing. So you're starting to see this happen. And in Twitter's case, yes, some of this might have been political with Musk back then, but I tend to think it was probably them just prioritizing and saying, you know what, Twitter's not working for us as a channel anymore. It's not helping us achieve our goals and objectives, so let's pause it. So the questions I think to ask yourself today are, number one, do you have dead weight? Are there channels that you're using that are not actively contributing towards your goals? And the question I like to ask clients a lot is, what would happen if you kind of pause certain channels? Like, what's the worst case scenario? And usually the answer to that question is like, well, we have a couple squeaky wheels on Twitter, but like if we paused, I guess they'd just keep talking. Can you live with that? And the answer is usually sure. And okay, then we probably pause it. And then finally, do you know which channels your customers are prioritizing? So this is about you prioritizing, but also, do you know where your customers are showing up? Because a lot of us that have been working in social media marketing for a while now, we started these channels years ago, right? Well, the channels changed, the environment changed, lots of things changed, right? So it's not the same as it was 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, even 1 year ago. So finding out where your customers are hanging out, obviously, seeing if you have dead weight, asking yourself some tough questions. It would make sense for a lot of brands to really prioritize channels this year because we're stretched so thin. Our world is so complex. It's really time to ratchet it back. And I think you're going to see a lot more of this in the year ahead. Number two, this tug of war between authenticity and AI, I think is going to continue. Because on one hand, you have consumers and the public saying, yeah, we want authentic, non-promotional content from brands. Yes, we want transparency about your business practices and your values. Yes, we want information on how your products are sourced. We want all that stuff. That's what people are asking for, consumers are asking for. And you're seeing stuff like this happen in real time.
and 0 being no odor. 12 hours after a shower, the pea-sized amount of Lumi applied between your butt cheeks like this. I will demonstrate. Just kidding, I won't. Like this. Up, butt cheeks, tailbone. Rubs in like a lotion. Easy, easy peasy. I know what a lot of you are thinking. A deodorant for private parts? Just take a shower. And I know this because you leave that comment on social media. So let's face it, there's a lot going on down there. Everything is really close together. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to call it the crotch. We put Lumi to the test and compared it to a shower. 12 hours after a shower with soap and water, the average crotch has an odor score of 5 to 6 out of 10, with 10 being the worst odor ever and 0 being no odor. 12 hours after a shower and applying Lumi, you're at a 0 out of 10, no odor all day. I'm not a mathematician, but I think it means that Lumi is infinitely more effective than a shower alone. So just take a shower or shower with Lumi and be 0 out of 10. Just a pea-sized amount of.
So you can see there, that's about as authentic as it gets, right? Like this is the CEO of Lumi. She's wearing a tank top in the video, right? She's talking about, borderline inappropriate content. It's pretty real, right? And that's the authenticity that people are looking for in 2024. Now, here's another example from Adobe.
So I've been redesigning signs in New York City without anyone asking me to. For instance, take this flyer that I found for Myra, the dog walker. Don't get me wrong, this photo is incredible. But in a city with a million signs on the street, Myra's design just doesn't pop. So I go into Adobe Fresco and make Myra a logo by modifying a vintage font. Then I add some cute illustration and comforting colors that reflects the warmth and playfulness that shines through in her photo. I couldn't draw Myra in a way that would top this, so I found a way for her original photo to shine through my design. But hold on just a second. As I'm putting up Myra's flyer, I notice a second Myra flyer. Guys, Myra is a certified hustler. It's a good thing I already established her brand identity, which makes creating this second flyer for her babysitting business much easier. See, I don't know who Myra is, but hopefully after all this, the Myra brand, the empire, is going to be known by the whole neighborhood.
Brilliant, right? Adobe taking a piece of user-generated / influencer content, making it their own. But that's a concept that connects with a lot of us, right? We've been to a big city, you've seen these signs around on the poles and stuff like that. And here's this guy making them look a lot better. Like that's just a nice, real piece of authentic content that's working for them. 7-Eleven, same thing with Instagram with user-generated content. Years ago, they decided we're going to lean into this car culture that's outside our C-stores every night. And instead of stiff arming that, we're going to embrace it and we're going to feature their content. They're posting all these pictures of their cars outside our 7-Elevens. And we're going to use that as user-generated content on Instagram. And they've been doing that for a couple of years now. And it's been absolutely crushing for them. So this concept of authenticity is really resonating with people, continues to resonate with people. On the other hand, though, you have this avalanche of content that's coming our way with AI, right? Because there's claims that AI is going to generate 99% of content by 2025, which is pretty ridiculous. But the point remains is it's definitely going to take it up a notch. There's no question about that, right? 99%, I don't know about that, but it's going to take it up a notch. And at the same time, if you ask marketers, what they're going to do with content in the year ahead, they're saying we're going to produce more. So it's not like they're saying, no, less is more. We're not going to do more. Nope, they're going to do more. It's not a significant increase, as you can see here, but it's a lot of people are saying moderately. Yeah. So that's going to mean a decent bump up in content. And you're already starting to see this AI stuff play out with, like Heinz did an experiment with, like, what does ketchup look like to AI? They challenge people to do their user-generated content that way. And you're hearing data points from surveys like this one from Sloan that say when people had no information about the source of marketing or campaign copy, they preferred the results generated by AI. AI is showing that it can be just as good or better than humans at these kinds of persuasive tasks. So there's this tug of war that's going on between these two things. So I think what I think will happen this year is I think we will probably continue experimenting with AI, obviously, but probably more so with the brainstorming and ideation lenses. That seems to be what I hear the most people using it for. That's what I'm using it the most for. But at the same time, I think authenticity is going to be more important than ever before this year. I really do. With the election year coming up and all the people have their radars up for AI, it just feels like building trust and leaning into that like perspective and POV content is going to be, that's where it's going to be at. So I think the content mix is going to be both. There's going to be a tug of war a little bit, but like I would lean probably more towards authenticity and more authentic content. But that's what I see happening in 2024. Number three, brands I think will start investing more in this, concept of dark social. And I know I'm not breaking ground here either, and I know we've heard this before many years, right? Dark social is not a new concept. If you haven't heard about dark social, I've heard it talked about that way. It's basically sharing social content, um, behind the firewall. So DMs, text messages, things of that nature, Slack channels, stuff like that. And this has been going on for 3, 4, 5 years, so not new at all. However, it gets a lot more real when the president and founder of Instagram is saying things like this. People are sharing to feeds less, but to stories more, and in messages even more still. That's not great grammar, is it? On Instagram, notes have quickly become a big thing, particularly for young people. So it's not so much that people are sharing less, but rather that they're sharing differently. And that last sentence is the key, right? People aren't sharing less. We're just not seeing it anymore. Think about like how you share content, social content with your friends and family. You most likely do this. You most likely share via DM. You most likely share stuff via text. You most likely, you might be involved in a private Facebook community. Like me and my wife, this is one of the the key ways we communicate with our teenagers. We find funny stuff that we know our kids will find funny on Instagram, and we DM it to them on Instagram, and then we go back and forth and they do the same thing. Like that's dark social. The brands can't see that as much, right? So that's concerning. Wall Street Journal articles like this are concerning. We aren't posting on social media as much anymore. Will we ever? Not sure. Wall Street Journal, right? Not just some niche magazine. And you have, surveys from Capterra saying dark social media activity accounts for nearly half of brand conversations on the web and with traffic. Half. That's a lot. SparkToro did a survey this year answering the question, could 95% of the traffic really be coming from dark social? This was from their post. This is from the post they made where they talked about all the traffic, and see number one there was dark. So is direct, which is largely dark social, traffic they can't quantify. And then organic, not surprisingly, number two. But then look at the social referral traffic, right? Way less than 1%. By the way, this is not abnormal. In the audits I do, this is totally what I see. It's usually organic's not usually that far behind direct, but it's organic, direct, and then social is way down the list. So we're starting to see more signs that this is more real. Not to mention 3 of the top social networks in the world are really dark social networks, right? WhatsApp, WeChat, Messenger. I would even argue Instagram and TikTok to an extent, right? There's a lot of DM sharing going on there. So you're talking about a lot of dark social activity right now, and it's getting too big to ignore. So some of the brands are stepping up and kind of experimenting with this. We see Starbucks started the Discord server, just experimenting, you can tell, with like, hashtags for food and drink, pet pics, music, stuff of that nature. Peloton has long had an active private Facebook group for their Peloton fanatics, which is crazy engaging, right? You can see here people boasting about their workout strings, people asking questions, and Peloton's jumping in from time to time, but more often than not, it's just the community supporting people. And to the point where, posts like this are getting, 844 likes, 159 comments. Like, you're just getting crazy engagement for the most basic things. So this is where the action's happening. Instapot, same thing. They have a private Facebook group. They see, again, huge engagement numbers here. In many cases, bigger than the ones they're seeing on their brand pages. So people are gravitating towards this dark social activity and have been for years. So I think right now it's evaluating your current state, right? Like, how is your organic social performing for you? How much traffic is social really driving to your websites? That's a good big question right now. And then consider some easy steps you can take, right? Using trackable links, if you're not already, is an easy thing you can do. So start tracking everything. And then think about, could you start your own private social community that would, help with some kind of business issue that you're running into, right? To create retention, extend wallet share, things of that nature. And then maybe think about exclusive social offers via messaging, stuff like that. But there's some easy things you can do to start dipping your toe into the dark social waters without saying we need to go all dark social. No, you don't need to do that quite yet, but like you definitely need to acknowledge it and like start thinking about how you're going to hit that, because it's here. It's too big to ignore now, and it's time that we start really taking it seriously. Number 4, LinkedIn is going to become even more personal, I think, in the year ahead, much to some people's chagrin. And I'm not talking about the crying CEO guy that you might probably remember from, it was about a year ago, I think, when he posted this video after laying off some employees. And he crossed the line, didn't know the line, doubled down on it, didn't go well. Not like that. I'm more talking about this kind of stuff where people are leaning into talking about their personal lives more, right? So like having a baby, getting sick. The post from Sammy here on the left from Nike talking about why she drinks water, or post about water consumption during the day. Like these really personal topics that we weren't seeing on LinkedIn as much, a few 2, 3, 4 years ago. Now we're seeing all the time. So the big question, why is this happening? I think first, I think people are posting a little bit less on Facebook. We used to see this stuff on Facebook a lot, and now fewer people are actively using Facebook. Fewer people are using Twitter. We saw it there too. So they're turning to LinkedIn as their go-to platform for a lot of different things. That's just an educated guess on my part, but that I do think that's part of it, right? Number 2, there's just a lot more activity on LinkedIn. During the pandemic, we know LinkedIn blew up. The number of LinkedIn posts grew by 41% in the last 2 years on LinkedIn. So there's just more people there. There's a lot more people posting. I can tell you from I've been on LinkedIn for 10 plus years, and just the last few years, you've seen my feed is just way busier than it was before, with way more new people than were out there, before the pandemic. So like this is a big factor too. And then finally, there's the work piece of it, where I think remote work is lowering inhibitions a little bit. After the pandemic, people are becoming a little more authentic and transparent online. That wasn't happening before. Think about before the pandemic. I remember there was a lot of people that would still talk about, like, I have 2 work selves. I have my work persona, and I have my personal persona, and they don't intermix. Those are 2 separate people, basically. Well, we all had to work at home for a couple of years, like that. That didn't exist anymore. Like you were one person, whether you liked it or not. And I think people are coming to grips with that now more. So you're seeing that. And then there's probably a little bit of trend setting going on here, where people are seeing success with this more authentic content. And then they're like, whoa, that works. I'm going to do more of that just for the sake of getting likes. You might be seeing some of that, but I do think all those factors are playing into this. And I've seen this firsthand. I do an audit of my LinkedIn channel at the end of every year. And some of my most, quote unquote, popular posts every year, or this last year, sorry, were these personal posts. These had nothing to do with work. The one on the left was a post of me taking my son on a tour of Winona State, my alma mater, which is a big deal for many different reasons that I won't get into. And the post on the right was a post about my car getting stolen right outside my front door, and watching the people do it, and how I had to buy new cars as a result, how that process sucked. That had very little to do with work, but it was, those were more personal updates that I posted on LinkedIn. And it's not just me, it's my clients. Stacia Nelson is the CEO of Pivot Strategies, which is a change comms agency up here in Minneapolis. And I worked with her for about a couple of years ago, on her LinkedIn presence. And we found very quickly that when she made posts like this, which was her most successful post by far, where she talked about spending time with her dad, taking time from her work to spend time with her dad, these more personal posts always resonated the best, almost always. Another client, the people at Cargill, Florian is one of their folks that sits in their C-suite at Cargill, very active on LinkedIn. But again, when he's posting about personal topics, like his daughter graduated from college, that's when he's seeing the most engagement. So across the board, I'm seeing this a lot. So the next question really becomes, should we be more personal on LinkedIn? And I kind of lean towards yes on this because I think work seems like it's getting more impersonal, right? And more transactional. And we're not seeing each other as much as we used to. So like, I think it would behoove us to be a little more personal, on LinkedIn. And everyone's going to have varying degrees of how they do that. But and opinions are divided. I talked about this on LinkedIn. These are some of the responses I heard from people. Some people agree, some people no. I think we should still have separate things. And you know what? There's no right or wrong answer. Everyone's got different feelings on how this is going to work. But I saw this post from Christina Halverson, who runs Brain Traffic here in Minneapolis, and I thought this kind of feels like I bet you how a lot of people are feeling, where she's been pressuring herself to do perfect stuff on LinkedIn. Now she's just going to let it loose. She's going to show more pictures. She's going to talk about more personal topics. And not surprisingly, so far, like she's talked about her dog, she's talked about working out. Like these things are crushing because people want to know. Like I haven't heard from Christina a lot the last couple of years, and now she's talking more. And it's like this is great. Personally, I like that. So I, what does this mean for us really? I think number one, a lot of us coach leaders like Florian and Stacia I showed you before on LinkedIn. I do think it's going to be leaning into more original photos of those leaders big time is going to help as much as you can do. Giving followers a look into those CEOs and those leaders' personalities would also help. So I do think you're going to see more of that. And like, again, it's personal preference. I know leaders really usually do not like that, but the more you can encourage them to do that, I think the better. And then for us personally, as users of LinkedIn, for all of us, I think, at the end of the day, this doesn't really just apply to me. I'm a solo consultant guy, so I probably the LinkedIn thing matters to me a little bit more than other people. But I would still also say people want to work with people they like and admire. That's one thing I've learned as a solo consultant over the years. Like they mostly want to work with you because they like you and they admire you or you're a culture fit, that kind of thing. Well, how are they supposed to know anything about you if you don't share it? So that's a good outlet for that kind of stuff on LinkedIn. And again, I think we need to see each other more. So we're still having this remote work, fully remote, hybrid at best. The more we can see each other, I think we can start to form a little more human connection in what's happening in the last few years. And I think that's going to be good for everybody. Number 5, I think there's going to be a move from some key metrics in 2024, and that's going to kind of shift. We're at an inflection point here with metrics where we're shifting from engagement and traffic, which have long been KPIs we've measured, and really the most key KPIs in social marketing, to awareness and discovery. Because the traditional metrics are kind of fading, right? So I talked about engagement metrics kind of going south, right? We know that. Facebook, Twitter, even now Instagram to an extent, right? So they're really fading as a power metric. And I told you before in all these audits I've done, this is from a client that shall remain nameless, but it's not uncommon. This is what I see, right? I told you direct and organic right at the top, usually dark social, organic. Email's usually up there. Paid search will be up there. Organic social, almost always at the bottom. Almost always. And in many cases, it's less than 1% of traffic. So it's minuscule. Minuscule. NPR, and for those of you that remember this, they left Twitter, almost a year ago now. And they had this article that came out about them in the fall talking about how they haven't even noticed any difference, right? They left Twitter. They thought they'd see this big drop off in traffic and engagement and stuff like that. Nope, no difference. So those traditional metrics are fading, and in the stead, I think is going to slip awareness. Even though I know awareness has been around, obviously, we're still after that, but it's going to get a bigger stage because think about what's the biggest content format we usually focus on right now, right? Video, right? Reels, TikTok, video, and how are we measuring the success of video right now? Awareness, right? We want more people to see our video, and hopefully the awareness metrics will go better for video as we go along. But like, that's really the key for video, and that's one of the primary content formats that's working the best for many different platforms and many different brands right now. And then discovery obviously is becoming bigger all the time, social discovery, right? So we know that's being fueled by TikTok, and we know it's not quite, it doesn't eclipse search engines, not even close, right? So stats like this from HubSpot show it's not close yet, but it's significant, and it's being driven by young people, right? So if you ask anyone, I just talked about this in class with the kids the other night. Like, how would you find stuff if you were on a road trip and you wanted to find a restaurant to go to, and all of them said TikTok or Instagram, all of them. So that's going to catch up with older generations as they consider their options. And it's not just about search, it's about just, it's really discovery, right? You think about like how people like discover new products, and they're largely doing that on like Instagram and TikTok for the most part, as you can see here. And again, that trend's younger, but if you ask a young person between the ages of, I don't know, 15 and 30, like that's how they're finding stuff. Product discovery is happening in social, right? And less via search engines and other platforms. So I think action steps here is kind of revisit your own Google Analytics and find out how much traffic social is driving into your site. Like I just told you what I see with the audits, but yours might be different. So I encourage you to look at your own stuff. Revisit those engagements. What do they look like? And how many comments and shares are you really seeing? And are the comments meaningful? Like that's really where the rubber hits the road. It's not really so much about the likes, which is pretty passive, right? Like comments and shares, that's what we want. Like if those are super low, then it's like, okay, maybe we're measuring the wrong things. If you're leaning into video in 2024, like many brands are, again, maybe up the awareness metrics up a bit. Like take a closer look at awareness, because that's really what you're pushing. If you're pushing video, you're measuring awareness, not engagement or traffic. Videos aren't going to drive those things. And then really, have you thought about a discovery goal? And maybe this is the year you start to think about that. I know that's still pretty new, but that's really a huge thing for young people. So if your target audience is anyone under the age of 30, like I would say that's got to be a huge thing for you, because that's why they're searching for stuff. So some things to think about on the metrics front. Number 6, can't have a trends presentation without talking about the elephant in the room, right? And my take on Twitter right now, or X, is that I don't really think anything's going to fill the void. Everyone wants to know like what's next, what's coming next, and like I'm not sure anything's going to do that right now. Mastodon, we heard about that a couple years ago, a year ago. That's not happening. The number of registered users is just 10 million as of last March. I don't see that happening. Blue Sky, which just kind of reintroduced itself, that has very low user numbers too. We'll see what happens with that, but my guess is probably not. And Threads is probably the closest. They came out with their recent user numbers too. I didn't update the deck for this, but 160 million for, and for context, Twitter's still saying they have 350 million, although you could question that. But the point is, no one's really emerging as like a huge threat yet. Threads is closer, but like, no one's really jumping out, right? And the questions really around Twitter are like, well, if it goes away, like what happens to my real-time monitoring and news? Because that's really the way people are using Twitter. Brands are using Twitter, at least, right? Well, I would argue when it comes to news, like more people are getting news from TikTok anyways, especially young people. And that's only going to get more pronounced as the years go on, I think. So that might not be an issue. As you can see from this Pew Research survey. And then when it comes to monitoring too, where do you see brands hitting the monitoring jackpot recently? TikTok, right? The Stanley example recently, that was a TikTok thing. It didn't happen on Twitter. North Face had an example like this recently. That was on TikTok. If you go back to Ocean Spray a couple years ago, that was on TikTok. Like it's TikTok. That's the real time, monitoring play right now. Like Twitter, yes. And like there was Super Bowl on Sunday. Yes, I'll be following Twitter. I want to see what people are saying. So a little bit, yes. But like it's not like all is lost if Twitter goes away. You can't monitor anything. You still have TikTok. So what should you be doing, I think, and as it relates to Twitter right now, it's like evaluate your current Twitter account. And again, I go back to, is it still effective and by what metrics? Like do your own research there. And again, like think about worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario if you pause it? Will anyone really notice? I would actually reserve brand handles on those Twitter competitors, especially Threads for sure, because that one's the closest and they have the most money behind it. And there just seems like there could be something there eventually. And it might not just be a Twitter replacement. It might just be a separate network, but like it pays to just reserve handles and experiment maybe and just see what's going on. And then I would consider amping up your listening efforts on some of those other channels like TikTok. Even if you're not there, you can still use it as a monitoring tool. I really think that that's the way to go. I mean, I wouldn't fret too much about if Twitter kind of goes away because we have other things in place that can help us do this. The same things that Twitter was helping us do in the first place. So Twitter, not sure anything will replace that. That was my one like prediction type thing I had in the presentation. Number 7, this concept of entertaining and then educating, or really just entertaining, right? Um, because a lot of brands, their whole one of their big MOs with social media really is to like they want to educate people, right? Whether it's on thought leadership or how to use products, or there's an education. We want people to get smarter about something. That's usually an MO for a lot of brands, especially B2B brands. But the current content strategies we're doing for that are not working. Sharing links is not working, not by any stretch of the imagination. Again, all the audits I've done over the last 5-6 years, I see two things. I see when they're posting posts with links in them, I see engagement scores way lower than other kinds of posts, right? And again, I go back to the traffic stats I showed you in Google Analytics. Organic social is always at the bottom. So like it's not driving traffic, it's not driving engagement. Like what is it doing? It's not doing anything. And branded graphics aren't working either for that purpose, right? So we see a lot of these kind of branded graphics like this on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram even. And again, in the audits I do, I separate out branded graphics. They get their own content format bucket. And again, in most of the audits I see them, they're at the bottom. So those are not working. And in many cases like this one, you guys are looking at this probably on a laptop or big computer screen, and we can barely read it now. I know I'm older than probably some of you, but I have my glasses on and I can barely read it. You definitely can't read this on a phone. So the branded graphics aren't working for a lot of different reasons. But what is working is this concept of using education or using entertainment to get to education. So this is an example. I'm not going to play the video, but this is an example of, in the interest of time, but this is an example from my alma mater at Winona, and they did this series called The Watchler, which plays off The Bachelor, obviously, and Wazoo, the guy with the looks like the warrior there, is the mascot, and he's the Watchler, and they set him up on dates with some of the students, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, it's campy, or whatever. But they quickly pivot to educational points, right? So one of the videos talks about like different places to study on campus, like they're using it as a tool. The campiness of The Bachelor and the education piece or the entertainment piece of it to get to the education. That's what's working, and that's working for Winona.
Everyone, and welcome to the first episode of The Watchler.
I'm not going to show that. I will show this one though, because I think this is kind of significant in terms of entertainment, because yes, entertain to educate, but also sometimes just entertain to entertain, because we've gotten away from just using social media to entertain and grasp attention. Because think of the competition you have for eyeballs on any social platform. You are competing with super creative and compelling influencers. You are competing with other people. You are competing with other brands. And sometimes you just got to entertain. And I'll show you this video and we'll talk about this in a second.
Who said this?
Tiger Van.
Who said this?
Tiger Van. What are you doing?
My sentence.
Tiger Van.
So obviously, Coleman Park, great job, by the way. This thing went everywhere. In fact, I think I saw this or read about this in the newspaper, to tell you the truth. But great job here. And as you can see from the video, I mean, the only goal as far as I can see here is probably just to entertain and be fun, right? And I think a lot of us could do that. Even I know not every brand can do this. I know like hospitals are gonna have a hard time with that, and some other brands that are a little more serious. But like most of our brands can have a little fun. We can loosen up and play on some things and just entertain to entertain and grab attention. And this goes back towards the metrics too, by the way, awareness, stuff like that. Think about how much awareness Como Park got from this video. Tons and tons and tons. So great job by Como Park Conservatory. So what should you do now? I think number one, probably kill those links. Those link posts, I'm telling you, and all the audits I've done, they're not working ever. So think about maybe transitioning to like, if worst comes to worst, think about how you could put the content that's like on the website you're trying to drive to into the post itself. Like people want to stay on the platform. And then use those branded graphics pretty sparingly. I'm not saying we go away from those completely because they certainly have a spot, but we're gonna have to ratchet that back because that's kind of gotten out of control, in my opinion. And then look for creative ways to grab attention and have a little fun with the brand. Think about the Como Park thing I just showed you, like that. And we're going to need to see more of that because competition for eyeballs and attention is just going to get harder. And we can't think that branded graphics and link posts are going to do it. They're not. They're not. We're going to have to get creative. So that's a big challenge for all of us, I think, in the year ahead. Number 8, long form content is anything but dead. I know this will be music to the ears of many of my PR friends who have long held their hats on long form content, but I just think about like the most successful podcast right now. I mean, we just saw Smartless get a $100 million contract with Sirius FM or Sirius Radio, whatever it's called now. These are two of the most popular podcasts on the market right now, Smartless and Armchair Expert. They are massive podcasts, massive, and they are not short. Like for anyone that listens to Smartless or Armchair Expert, you know they can be an hour, hour and a half. Like they're long. They're super long, but they are good and they have talent behind them and they are funny. And that's why people listen to it. So if you make long form content and it's good, people are still going to listen to it or watch it or consume it, right? What about Mr. Beast? He is a juggernaut, obviously. His last 10 videos on YouTube have averaged 130 million views. The Super Bowl is on Sunday, and that is more than a Super Bowl commercial. That is what he's averaging on YouTube. And his videos, again, it's not snackable content. They're not 5 seconds long. They're like a TV show. They're 20 to 30 minutes long. They're long. So that is not short form content either. What about B2B? Well, what about the Edelman Trust Barometer? They just came out with this not too recently, or not too it was in January sometime. That's a 50-page report. That's not snackable content either. And sure, they cut it up and they present it in snackable ways, for sure. But the whole report itself is long and has a lot of data in it. And a lot of people link to that, and a lot of people read it every year. So that's definitely not short form content. That's long form content too. So long form's definitely still working in spots. And I think the challenge I would say for brands like people like us and brands that we work for is that we just need to think a little bit more like the creators, because the creators are leading the way on this, obviously, right? I go back to Mr. Beast with what he does on YouTube. I think like honing your visual identity can be a big piece of this, of making any kind of content work better. It's rumored that these little thumbnails that he has on YouTube, he will pay designers $10,000 for the best one because he knows that's how important they are to clicks and to getting people to consume his content. Storytelling obviously is kind of this generic term that gets thrown around, but this focus on like super interesting storytelling to your target audience, just to your target audience, I think is what's going to drive this. And that's what you see with like Patagonia, right? Patagonia doesn't care about the masses. They don't care about everybody. They care about people that are like hyper interested in climate change and hyper interested in the outdoors and hyper interested, not just people that go skiing like one time a year, but people that go skiing like 20 times a year. So they have a whole thing called Patagonia Films. And like this one, they feature their CEO, their founder, talking about how he's building homes with hay bales, which is super interesting. And for their target audience, really, really interesting, I would think. To the point where their last 5 Patagonia Films episodes have averaged almost 250,000 views and almost 100 comments. And the comments, as you can see here from some of these comments, they're not like your typical like TikTok comment. These are long, thoughtful comments, which makes sense considering their target audience. Again, their target audience are probably highly educated, care about the environment, care about outdoors, they're going to leave long, thoughtful comments. So they're hitting their target audience right between the eyes with this stuff, and they know what they're doing with the storytelling. And then finally, I think having a hyper focus, laser focus on community is a big piece of this success of some of these long form content creators too. Like again, Armchair Expert. For those of you that watch Armchair Expert or listen to it, you know some of the most fun and exciting and interesting episodes are these what they call Armchair Anonymous, which they aren't the interviews. They're where they interview community members about random topics like bartending or babysitting or piercings. And they're often hilarious. They're by far my wife and I's favorite episodes on this podcast. And they have everything to do with community. And again, they're making him and Monica, Dax and Monica are making millions of dollars off this podcast. They don't need to do this. The last thing they need to do is like interview people, these random randos from the community about what they're thinking about these topics. But they know the power of the community, and they know that makes them more popular, and they know that makes people want to listen more, and they know these are the most popular episodes. So there's a lot of power in that community. And how can you harness that to develop more of that long form content that people care about? That's the kind of the lesson here. So a lot of things to think about with that long form content, I think, heading into the 2024. I got two left here. Number 9, it's all about the comments again. I know this isn't a new concept. A lot of people talk about comments, but this might not be the way you're thinking about. So I'm going to play you this Pringles video, and then we'll talk about this.
I just can't lose.
It always forwards to that part.
Got this feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't lose. Yes, I'm on my way. Mighty glad you stayed. That's where I'm going. The morning rain. Got this feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't.
So that's a fun spot, right? There's a lot of talk in the creative community about the comments are the creative brief. And I think there's a lot of truth to that in terms of whether it's agencies or companies sourcing ideas for creative campaigns based on the comments they read. I mean, these are the comments from that spot on YouTube. And that's where the agency that developed this came up with it, right? Allegedly, at least, is like they sourced the comments. They saw a lot of people talking about getting their arms stuck in the Pringles can, and they developed a whole campaign around that. Comments are the creative brief. So reading those comments can help companies ideate around what people are talking about for the brand, angles to market the brand, how people are perceiving the brand, all that kind of stuff. I know that's not new, but like revisiting this in 2024, I think makes a lot of sense. In other cases, the comments are the social content. In the case of, this is one of my favorite examples from the last couple of years, Nutter Butter, where they pivoted from doing very basic run-of-the-mill Instagram content, product packaging, all that kind of stuff, to focusing their content more meme-like fashion on one of their biggest fans, whose name was Aiden. So there's this guy named Aiden, or person named Aiden, that would always comment on their posts, always the first comment usually. And at some point they said, let's create content around Aiden and just have some fun with it. And that stuff crushed last year, and to the point where they went away from it from a little bit, and all the people in the comment stream were saying, where's Aiden? Where's Aiden? We want Aiden back. So in some cases, the comments can become the content itself. Venmo does a good job of this with taking, the whole trick of like taking, tweets or in this case, probably, this looks like a tweet, but sometimes they'll take content from their platform actually and feature it in the post itself. So the content becomes the comment becomes the content there too. And then we know the comments are the community too. So Duolingo is a good example of this, right? The comments, they do a great job of like responding to a lot of comments, and they get a lot of comments, right? You can see here on these two TikToks, what, 20,000 on the left and 62,000 on the right. Now they're not responding to all of them, but they're responding to way more than most brands do. And that's served them pretty darn well, I think, over the years, right? To the point where you have this woman who is a new follow for me on LinkedIn from Auntie Anne says, I always make time to reply back to almost every TikTok comment, even when I post a video, until it hits 10,000, because then I will have no time to do anything else. It's important to engage with your audience, especially when you want them to engage with your content. I personally think it's so fun to banter with people and brands, especially when things get a little spicy. Make social fun, make social personable, make it less serious. So and not every brand is Auntie Annie's. She's got a specific advantage there for sure. But again, we can have a little more fun, and we should be paying a lot of attention to those comments, because those comments are super valuable. And for years, we've seen a lot of brands kind of do this push strategy, and they're not paying attention to the community at all. But I think I've showed you various examples today of brands and creators and people that have paid attention to the comments and how that's really been worth it. So things to think about here, I think, make this the year that you recommit to acknowledging and responding to the comments. If you're like most brands, you don't get a ton of comments, so you have opportunity there. And then again, recommit to reading them, all of them. Try to read the comments as much as you can, because you'd be surprised what you can get from that, right? Whether it's creative inspiration, problem solving, heading off customer issues. The comments, very important. And then, what can you do with some of those comments? Could you create additional content? Could you thank a customer privately? Could you ask, your people that comment the most to be involved in a social focus group? Like, you have some opportunities with the comments there. But this is one of those ones that really impacts all of us, and we all could probably do a better job, I would think. And finally, number 10, YouTube Shorts. I think I would maybe think about repurposing here, but not expecting really a lot just yet, because Shorts are growing quickly for sure. Like we've seen some of the stats here, more than 2.3 billion people are on YouTube, so that's a huge built-in audience. Shorts is, up substantially even from 2022 last year, and YouTube's pouring a lot of money into it for content creators. So we know there's advantages here for sure, and they're very popular. And there's interest, a lot of people searching for this, a lot of people talking about Shorts, stuff like that. So there's stuff there. However, when I did a little bit of digging on, let's see how brands are faring here. Okay, let's see how Kohl's is faring, right? So here's Kohl's, and I looked at their last 10, their lowest, their least successful short had 232 impressions, their highest had 934. Okay, well, how does that compare against their TikTok page, for example? Well, as you can see here, it's not even close. Not even close. So we got a ways to go, right? What about a B2B brand? What about IBM? Again, here's their Shorts page. Lowest at 285, highest at 540. If we look at their TikTok page, yes, IBM has a TikTok page. Again, not even close. Just crushing it. Not quite as bad as Kohl's, but pretty bad. Right here in our backyard, Target, their Shorts, better, right? 1,000, 5,200, not bad. But then if you compare that against their Instagram Reels, holy crap, right? And that's where they're really investing a lot of time and effort, but just crushing. So Shorts, not quite there yet, right? Where the action's at really with Shorts, it seems like, is like influencers and creators. So Mr. Beast, obviously, is a huge example, obviously, but there's other creators that are really doing well with Shorts, and I think that's where it's working, because they're more creative than brands, obviously, and they're just better at it. So they're experimenting with it. YouTube's pouring the money in. That's kind of where it's at. So what should you do? I would think, I repurpose and experiment. There's no reason not to repurpose at this point. So if you're active on Reels or TikTok, like think about repurposing there and just see what works and see how it goes. And it's not going to kill you to have shorts content on your page, on your YouTube page. Think about tying those shorts to your existing YouTube content. You can use it as a way to maybe filter people into your long form videos. I think that would work. And then if you're working with creators on YouTube, obviously consider adding that shorts to your ask list. That would, I think, make a lot of sense. They're getting incented to do it anyways. And again, they're better at it than brands are at this point. So I think that would make a lot of sense with shorts. So there's your trends, or at least the trends I think are going to impact most of us this year. I did record. I am recording this today, so I'm going to post this on probably my site, my blog. So if you have people that missed it and you want to share it with them, I'm going to do that. Don't feel like you have to write this stuff down now. If you're interested in working with me, send me a note at eric@erichansen.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me there for sure. And if you're interested in signing up for my newsletter, again, you can subscribe by scanning this code and doing that if you're not already. And with that, good to see a lot of familiar faces on the call today. I see some chat things here. I'm going to look at those and I'll respond to them in kind. But appreciate everyone following along and participating and watching today, and hope to see some of you soon and hear from you maybe on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Eric.